All right, today we're diving deep into the Dhammapada. Now, this is one of Buddhism's most cherished and honestly most practical texts. You can think of it less like some dense, abstract philosophy and more like a user's guide to the most complex and powerful tool we'll ever own, our own mind.
So, here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at the core problem the Dhammapada says we're all facing. Then we get to its radical diagnosis, the idea that our mind is the source of, well, everything. From there, we'll explore the path to freedom it lays out, the clear choice it gives us between wisdom and foolishness, its incredible historical impact, and finally, why these ancient words might be more important for us today than ever before.
Okay, so first things first. Let's get a handle on the fundamental issue the Dhammapada is trying to solve. And it doesn't start with a nice, comforting thought. Nope, it starts with a pretty stark, clear-eyed look at the human condition. You know, the text paints this picture of life that might feel incredibly familiar. It points out that everything is always changing, that our bodies are fragile, and that life, as it says in one verse, inevitably ends. Now, this isn't meant to be depressing, not at all. It's meant to be realistic. It's the necessary starting point for any real investigation into our lives. And this verse just perfectly captures the urgency of it all. It's asking us to imagine that we are living inside a house that is constantly on fire. I mean, if you knew that, really knew it, wouldn't your absolute first priority be finding a way out? This powerful metaphor frames the whole spiritual search not as some casual hobby, but as an absolute necessity. So, if life is like a burning house, what's fueling the flames? Where's the fire coming from? The Dhammapada points to a single source, and its diagnosis is just as simple as it is revolutionary.
This is it. This is the very first verse, and it is the absolute heart of the entire text. It's arguing that our reality, our happiness, our suffering, it isn't primarily shaped by what happens to us, but by the quality and the content of our own minds. The very next verse says that if you act with a pure thought, happiness follows you just like a shadow that never, ever leaves.
So the big takeaway here is that mastering the mind is everything. The text actually warns that a wrongly directed mind will do us more harm than any enemy ever could. But a well-directed mind, one that we've intentionally trained and guarded, that becomes our greatest ally. It becomes a more reliable source of well-being than even our closest friends or family. All right, so if an untamed mind is the root of the problem, well, it's got to be the solution too, right? The Dhammapada doesn't just point out the issue. It gives us a clear, actionable prescription for how to achieve this inner freedom. The path it lays out is a really active one. First, it calls for earnestness, which is basically a state of vigilant mindfulness, of being awake and aware of our thoughts and actions. Second, it requires restraint, learning to control our impulses and senses instead of just being dragged around by them. And third, it asks us to fashion ourselves, to consciously and skillfully shape our own character, kind of like how a master carpenter takes a raw piece of wood and shapes it into something beautiful. Now, to really hammer this point home, to make the choice between this life of inner struggle and a life of freedom crystal clear, the Dhammapada constantly uses this powerful contrast, showing us two totally different ways of moving through the world. So you've got these two distinct paths. On one side, you have the fool. They're tormented by their attachments, constantly thinking, these kids are mine, this money is mine. They hold on to hatred, and they're just tossed back and forth by praise and blame. But in stark contrast, you have the wise. They learn to end hatred with love, they call nothing their own, and they remain as firm and unshaken as a solid rock. It's a really clear choice. So you can imagine this powerful psychological framework, this intense focus on cultivating your inner world instead of just worrying about external stuff, it had a massive and lasting impact that went way beyond just monasteries. The Dhammapada became a cornerstone of Theravada Buddhism, and its wisdom just seeped into the cultural DNA of nations all across Asia. I mean, think about it. At a time when a lot of religious practice was focused on external rituals, this radical idea of internal, personal responsibility was a game changer. This focus on self-mastery and ethics influenced everything, from laws and ideas about leadership to the moral stories passed down from parent to child. So, all of this history brings us to what is maybe the most important question. Why should we care? Why does this collection of verses, written down over 2,000 years ago, still feel so incredibly powerful today? Well, because the core human challenges it's talking about, they haven't gone anywhere. If anything, they've gotten louder. In our age of digital distraction, endless notifications, and constant social pressure, the Dhammapada's call to turn inward and train the mind feels more urgent than ever. It's like a practical toolkit for finding some stability in a really chaotic world. It teaches us what you might call cognitive responsibility, this powerful idea that we are the architects of our own experience. It gives us a blueprint for emotional regulation, for conquering anger, not with more anger, but with love. And at the end of the day, it reminds us that true strength isn't about controlling other people or the world around us, but about mastering ourselves. And we'll end on this final, incredibly powerful thought. The Dhammapada's ultimate challenge is for us to shift our focus from all the external battles of the world to the one that's happening inside us, the conquest of our own mind. Because according to this timeless wisdom, that is the only victory that truly, deeply matters. This is for entertainment and educational purposes only.